Up to the edge, and the boys behind him saying, you better not do it. You'll fail at trying. You're going to go under. You're going to drown. And Simon begins to feel the fear and the intimidation of just getting out of the boat. The waves are slapping against the boat, and the boat is doing this number here, rocking. You think that thing just got to know it was rocking in the storm. Simon has got to overcome his friends. Simon's got to overcome his fear by sitting on the edge of the boat looking at Jesus, hanging on to a rocking boat. And this church right now is standing in the boat that's rocking, but we're looking at Jesus and we're trying to make our mind up. Is the risk worth it? Can I take the risk? What if we fail? What if we go under? What if we don't make it? And we're rocking. The greatest miracle is when you start pulling your leg up and you start stepping over the side of the boat. That's the biggest miracle, is when you overcome yourself. You got to make up your mind. Are you a risk taker? Can you take a risk for Jesus? Are you going to stay in this boat and do nothing? Have nothing, see nothing, and be nothing the rest of our lives? Which one are you going to do? You going to be a risk taker? Oh, Jesus is calling his church to do some things you ain't never done before. And we're holding on the back of the pew. We ain't never done this. It ain't never been this way. It ain't never been this rough before. I remember when it was this good and that good. Well, it ain't good no more. It's rough waters now. But I hear a voice calling this church out. Yeah, be seated. And before Simon could ever accomplish anything, he had to be willing to leave some things behind. He had to learn to leave a ship called safe and secure behind. You know, life is good when it's safe and secure. It's all cozy, snuggly, and warm. You know, there's no threats in that. Nothing threatening about that, Brother Rick. I mean, you go in your house, you close it, you lock the doors, you pull the shades down. Somebody drives up, we don't look up. Safe. The problem with that is you're not living. You're just existing. And before I can become anything, I must be willing to take a risk. There are people in this country and around the world that won't even walk out, haven't been out of their house for 20 and 30 years. They won't even walk to their mailbox. They have other people who bring it and slide it through a slot in the door because they're too scared to go outside. They're afraid of getting sick. They're afraid of getting shot. They're afraid of getting kidnapped. They've never been kidnapped, never been shot. Nobody owns a gun in their town. And they're not going to get hit by a car. But they're scared to death something's going to happen. So they don't take no risk. So they're in their little world, they become safe and secure without risk. And without risk, life is safe and secure, but it's not life.
That's right.
Life is when you start taking risk. Because you can't accomplish nothing without risk. Look at somebody say, are you a risk taker? And before you can do that, you got to leave something. The first thing Simon had to leave was this little boat called safe and secure. He had to get out of the ship of do nothing. And he had to abandon the ship called do nothing. And too many of God's kids are in a ship called do nothing, and you feel safe and secure. Because your neighborhood's not talking about you. They ain't got you labeled no more. You're just a neighbor on 1312, whatever avenue. But they don't know you. But it's safe. It's secure, Sister Adams. Nobody knows you. Because we never got out. Never done nothing. It's safe. See, it's safe when you don't teach Bible studies, because then you have to face rejection. And you don't have to face questions that you can't answer. So the best thing to do is talk about how much we know, but don't teach it, because we may have a question about the Godhead or baptism that we can't answer because we don't bother reading the book. So I can't teach Bible studies. And the biggest thing I hear is, well, I just don't read good. Really? Well, how do you read that number on that gas pump? How do you read that number on that greenback called a dollar bill or a $20 bill? How do you read all that? But see, it's secure. Because they don't have to face questions. They don't have to answer nothing. See, the security blanket of staying and not doing nothing. There's security in doing nothing. The problem is nothing ever gets accomplished in the kingdom. Because nobody's willing to take a risk, Brother Ross.
That's right.
Nobody. And if we're not willing to take a risk, we can shout about revival. We can preach about revival, Sister Katrina. We can run and scream and holler and get excited when Brother Sam Henry gets here. But when he gets here, is this all that's going to be? Or we're going to start taking a risk. There's no risk in being in a job for 40 years and never truly being a witness to the point that you irritate people. And every time somebody sees you, they say, there goes that nut. All he wants to talk about is Jesus. There goes that woman. She's crazy. Leave her alone. What's wrong with you? She's so heavenly minded. She's no earthly good. Now, I used to agree with that, Brother Rick. I used to agree, my God, you can't be so heavenly minded. You can't be any earthly good. Well, I found that if you ain't heavenly minded, you ain't heavenly good. Because I found out you can be earthly and be no heavenly good. But if you're going to be heavenly good, you can be heavenly minded. It's called kingdom mind. It's called the mind of Christ. But it's okay, see, it's a safety blanket and not being so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. But I find that people who are not heavenly minded don't do no good anyway. Because it's a security blanket. And when you're safe and secure, you don't have to take risks. And without taking risks, you don't get nothing accomplished. Come on, somebody.
That's right.
Look at somebody and say, are you a risk taker? Are you a risk taker? Can you take a risk? Because to take a risk, we have to leave this little secure world of ours and step out of this do-nothing world and say, you know, I'm going to take a risk. Gotta get out of it. And I found out that when God asks you to do something, it doesn't mean you have the ability to do it. Because he asked Simon to do something he could not do, Brother Jeffrey. He didn't have the resources to do it, and he didn't have the ability to do it. And I found out that when God asked me to do something, it's not because I have the ability to do it, and I don't have the resources to do it. That's how you know it's a risk. And so, because you don't have the finances, you don't have the resources, you don't have the manpower to do it, and you don't have the ability to do it, and God says, this is what I want you to do. How are we going to do it? How are we going to accomplish all of this? God says, don't worry about the how, you just start. And so Simon Peter steps out of that boat, and he has nothing to help him. And so when God gets ready to do something in our lives, he'll always ask us to do something that we do not have the sources or the ability. And if you don't believe that, ask Sarah and Abraham, because he asked them to have a kid and they couldn't even have one. Ask Israel, they stand by the walls of Jericho, and he asked them to march around it and it'll fall. But they didn't have no resources. So when God asks you to do something that you have no ability, you have no power, you have no resource to do, what he's trying to convey to you, what he's trying to do, is it means that he's going to empower you so you can do it through him. He already knows you do not have the ability to have a child. He already knows you don't have the resources to cause Jericho to fall. So he says, I know that. That's why I chose you. So that when I do what I do, you will not have any problem telling everybody it was I that do it. Because you don't have enough money. You don't have enough power. You don't have enough ability. You don't have greater numbers. You don't have this. You don't. So there's no way it's going to be confused about this. When I get through, you'll know why you're dancing. You'll know why you're clapping your hands. You'll know why you're singing. And you know who to give the glory to. Because you know you could not do this. You understand I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. The only question is not, can we have revival? It's not, are we going to have revival? It's not, can we win souls? Can you think that that's not the question? The question is who's going to be taking a risk to have revival? Because the fact is, Sister Ambrose, when you start taking the risk, that's when you're starting to walk in faith. People who are not willing to take a risk in the kingdom don't walk in faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, evidence of things unseen. If you don't have to hope for it and you can see it to get it, then there's no risk in it. And without a risk in it, it's not faith. Because faith demands I take a risk. Moses took a risk when he went back to Egypt and faced Pharaoh as a wounded man. Elijah took a risk when he faced Ahab. David took a risk when he faced Goliath. Gideon took a risk when he faced 120,000 men with only 300 with a candlestick and a clay pitcher. Simon took a risk when he chose to get out of the boat of fear and do nothing and try to walk on water. Nations are delivered, the heavens are closed, giants are defeated, armies are conquered, and the impossible becomes possible because one person took a risk. I wouldn't give you 10 cents for people who could speak in tongues but not willing to take a risk, because you ain't going to get nothing done. Because then people just won't come sit on a pew and just sit there and reap the benefits of the risk takers. Donald Trump went broke 2 or 3 times before he became a $9 billion billionaire. Went broke 2 or 3 times. I heard him say it. But he kept taking a risk. And now he's worth $9 billion. $9 billion. That's with a B, not an M. Look at somebody and say, don't you just wish you had just a crumb?
Right.
But he went broke 2 or 3 times. Now watch this. Lost everything he had. Now watch this. Now, are you listening to me? Now other people are benefiting because of his risk. They wasn't there when he lost everything. They wasn't there to encourage him when he did. But now they're working for this $9 billion man. And they're reaping benefits from him, all because, Brother Will, he took a risk. And they reap the benefits of it. And there's many people that said in the apostolic church it would never take a risk, but they want the benefits of it. And that's okay, because that happens in churches. But the problem is nobody's going to get benefited until somebody gets and takes a risk. Look at somebody and say, are you a risk taker? Because the impossible will not become possible until we begin to take a risk in what we say we believe in. Let's stand. So Simon climbs over the boat, and one step at a time he begins to walk on water, going to Jesus. I'm going to let you go. In the process of him trying to get to Jesus, he got off focus, Brother Royce, and that happens because we're human. And I can see the other boys back there on the boat going, see, I told you he was going to die. I told you he was going to fail. Look at him. The whole thing is this right here, folks. It didn't say he sunk, if that's a correct English word. I know it is in the South. It says he begins to sink. Now, let me ask you, how many have been in a swimming pool? Raise your hand. Oh, come on, you hold it now. You know you've been in a swimming pool. How many have been in a river or a pond swimming? Yeah. Well, let me ask you something. Have you ever stepped off of the platform you were standing on or out of the boat and you just began to sink? You know, I mean, here you are, Brother Don, here you are on the side of the pool and you go, and you just kind of drop about knee level, and you go, "Ooh, wait a minute, this," and you just kind of, and then you did a little bit more level, and you're just kind of sinking. You're just beginning to sink. Hey, somebody come here and help me. A few minutes later, you just say, no, it didn't say he said, it didn't, never said he sunk. It said he began, which means that when he turned his eyes away from Jesus, his feet went under the water a little bit. And the longer he looked around, slowly he was sinking. Now get this. He still ain't drowning. You never began to sink when you step into water. Now I know this is going to be a revelation for some of you. But if it's deep enough, you're going clean out of sight. I promise you. If you have an iPhone, you're going to lose it. If you have any kind of electronics, it's going to be gone. Because you're not going to begin to sink, you going out of sight. And we're all going to laugh and go, "Did you see that? They went clean out of sight." But Simon just began to sink. Just began slowly. Slowly. A little at a time, Brother Will. Which tells me that Jesus was still holding him up until he got refocused. Because he ain't doing this on his own. And some of you haven't went completely out of sight yet. You know why? That thing that's trying to kill you just ain't sucked you under. It's because Jesus is still holding you until you get refocused. He keeps you afloat until you get refocused. And all of a sudden, Simon realizes, "I'm going under." And he turns, he looks at Jesus, Sister Amber, and said, "Master." And when he did, Sister Adams, the Bible says that Jesus took him by the hand. Now what's amazing is this, it didn't say that Jesus walked to him. It says that Jesus took him by the hand, which means that he was within hand stretch of Jesus. He was close enough to touch him, and he still sunk or began to sink. Which tells me that you can be close to Jesus, Brother Royce, and still get off focus every now and then. Because you're who you're close to, it doesn't take you completely under. And when Jesus took him by the hand, the Bible says, Straps, that he pulled him up. He said, "Oh, you little faith." He didn't say he didn't have no faith. He said, "You little faith. Oh, you little faith." And the Bible says they turned, says, Sheila says they turned, or they went to the boat, got in the boat, and everything was calm. Now, I'm closing. Now watch this. Watch this. Everybody, most people would have talked about Simon's failure. How he got off focus. You ever seen somebody like that? That no matter, Brother Rick, how great the accomplishment, what all they saw was that little sinking part. And all they want to discuss is the sinking part. Yeah, but I remember when. And I remember this. And I remember when they acted like this and when they done this. They forgot the miracle of him just getting out of the boat. And they forgot, they didn't see the miracle of him walking to Jesus, however far that was. All they can remember was he got off focus and began to sink, and that's all they can talk about. And they forgot that he walked with Jesus back to the boat and didn't sink. Isn't that amazing? All they want to talk about is the sinking part. Now watch this. Now watch this. So Jammer, listen to me. I want you to listen to one thing what Pastor Fixing to tell you. Not one of those other 11 could ever say they walked on water. They could say that Simon began to sink and he got off focus, but none of them could say they walked on water. Right. Not one. Not, they had to admit, I was too afraid. They had to admit, I couldn't have done that. I was too scared. I listened to everybody else. They had to admit, I never walked on water. But Simon could stand there and say, yeah, I began to sink all right. But let me tell you about walking on the water. I would have never done it had I not took a risk called faith and began to try something I had never done before. And I walked slowly. Yeah, I got all focused, but when I finally got to where I was at, I turned and walked and never sank. You see, there's a place in your relationship with God if you just keep walking, that when you start walking, finally you got it by hand, you won't sink no more. This thing will never pull you back down no more, but you got to take a risk. The question is not, is this church going to have revival? The question is not, is when it's going to happen. The question is, the miracle is done in place. The question is, are we going to start taking a risk and try to reach somebody? The question is when we're going to get out of our little world and step into a world we've never been involved in, and that's our next door neighbors, our co-workers, our friends, and start witnessing about Jesus and take a risk. Well, they may not like me. That's the risk of it. The risk factor is we want to see drug addicts. We want to see devil-possessed delivered. We want to see the drug addicts delivered. We want to see the alcoholic delivered. We want to see the prostitutes delivered. We want to see the whore delivered. And well, but who's going to take the risk of picking one of them tattoo parlors up and bringing them to church? Oh, my God, they may rob me. Well, they may not rob me. It's called a risk factor. But tell me when you're going to take a risk. When? This church is primed for revival. It's not, God's not waiting. We're not waiting on God. God's waiting on us. Right. Look at somebody say, can you take a risk for Jesus? I'm not asking for the stock market. I'm not asking for a 401k. I'm asking you to take a risk for Jesus. I left a young man a whole list of backsliders this week. I said, before I get in, I want every one of these backsliders visited. I said, you take them cups and you give them and their kids cups. I said, I want everyone. I said, don't let me come home and they're not been visited. I said, you got all week long. I said, you're going to get out of that house and you're going to do something while I'm gone. He took that list and had about 15 or 20 on it. I asked him this morning, I said, did you do the job? Yes, sir. How many? Every one of them but one. I couldn't find them. He's like, I'll tell you about this one. I said, all right, what happened? He said, man, I pulled him and said she starts bawling and squalling when she heard everything. Who's going to take a risk? Shannon, your revival waiting to happen. You can do one of two things. You can sit in your world and be depressed and discouraged and down and out, or you can make up your mind. You can get in that car with your sister. And y'all go down the road and start finding backsliders that you know and start trying to get them to church. But you got to take a risk. Will, your revival waiting to happen, son. Nobody's got a perfect past. Nobody ever had a perfect past. We all got skeletons in our closet. We all had a bad past for the most part in today's society. But the fact is, God's got his hand on your life. He didn't call you to sit on a pew, son. He called you to take a risk in him. The question is, will you take a risk? And B, everything God wants you. Because he's already anointed you. Mother, the question isn't, am I anointed? The question isn't, will I be a? That's not the question. The question is, will you take a risk and go visit someone? Tell them about Jesus. Will you take a risk? That's the question. Because all I can do is go take a risk, and I got to let Jesus to do the rest. Because we can't save nobody, we can't deliver nobody. The question, young ladies, is can you take a risk? It ain't can I. The question is, can you step out of the boat to find out? The question ain't can I. The question is, will you try? Take a risk. That's the question. The power and the strength comes as I step out, not as long as I stay in. Amber, you're a revival waiting to happen. You're not waiting on God. You're not waiting on the Holy Ghost. It's all waiting on you. The question is how big a risk are you willing to take? The bigger the risk, the greater return. The world tells us that. Play the stock market. The higher the risk that you buy and purchase in your stocks that you invest, the greater the return. It's a greater risk of losing more and possibly all, but you have a greater return if it hits. Same way in the kingdom. Low risk, low return. High risk, great return. It just depends on how big a risk you want to take. You're already knowing it. God's put His word in your mouth. It's time to take a risk. It's not if you can. You can. With Him. The question is, can you get out of the boat? Tracy, you're a revival waiting to happen. I'm knowing that God's on you. You're a light down at that best Western, and then God's anointed you and everything. The question is how much more of a risk are you going to take? That's the question. To see what some of you say you want to see, you got to step out on a limb that's rotten and trust He'll hold you up. You need to get somebody by the hand and ask them, turn around and ask them, say, are you a risk taker? And if they say yes, you need to come to this altar holding their hand and say, agree with me. We're going to have revival together.